This week, we welcome Rob Allen, Chief Product Officer at ThreatLocker, to discuss defense against configurations. In the Leadership and Communications segment, cybersecurity management for boards, metrics that matter. The emotional architecture of leadership, why energy, not strategy, builds great teams. Your transformation can't succeed without a talent strategy, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your business. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 420, recorded November 3rd, 2025. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this interview segment is my co-host, my one and only today, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
What we doing, Matt? Hey, my Patriots eked one out against the Falcons. Oh my. Let me tell you, that Falcons kicker must be literally kicking himself in the ass this week. Missed an extra point, and the Pats get to win. Hey, we'll take it.
Crazy, right? And the Bills beat KC.
I know.
Which is interesting.
What a game. What a game. Steelers took a big one against the Colts, right?
I know.
Mean, so some are going to win. Browns had a bye. They have a bye?
Yeah, they had a bye.
They're playing the Jets next week, right?
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the barrel.
Exactly. Well, let me tell you, because you like to hit the college game. So Ohio State had one hell of a blowout against Penn, and Texas Tech. Your Texas Tech boys
finally got the K-State monkey off the back. Right? My son's been there for 5 years. Haven't beat K-State until this weekend. Finally.
Done.
Got it done. Big game in Lubbock this weekend against BYU, who's still undefeated. If they can win that game and win out, they go to the Big 12 championship. So I might have two teams in the championship game.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, let's get into this thing. This segment is sponsored by ThreatLocker. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker to learn more. Rob Allen is a highly regarded IT expert with over 20 years of experience in the field. Throughout his career, he has shaped the narrative on how businesses can embrace technology to drive innovation while mitigating cyber risks. With a career rooted in the technical field as a system administrator, technician, and engineer, Rob's hands-on background uniquely positions him to bridge the gap between technical execution and business strategy, something we talk about all the time on this show. Right. Rob, welcome back to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, Matt. Good to be here. And could I just say, go sports ball, whatever you were talking about there a minute ago.
Hand egg.
I mean, I'm guessing that's what you were talking about. I mean, you started talking about falcons, so I assumed it was some sort of a bird watching fetish going on. But then it sort of veered off into what sounded like
Rob, you should have seen my house. This is the time of year that I know we're heading into winter, because this was the last weekend that every major sport was playing at the same time. I had basketball games, football games, baseball games because of the World Series, hockey and soccer on split screens and probably every TV in my house.
I noticed you mentioned one major sport there in that list you just provided. One sport that is played all around the world. But I digress. I digress.
Baseball's played a lot of places too, but yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, at least in the Western Hemisphere. Maybe
not
in Europe that much, but yeah.
A little bit smaller than Western Hemisphere, maybe. Maybe one half of one continent, and it's called the World Series.
Yeah, of course. It's called the Super Bowl too.
We're world
It
champions.
is indeed called the
World
Super Bowl.
champions.
That is undeniable. Anyway, I've got myself in enough trouble for one day, so I think we'll just leave that conversation right there.
All right, we're gonna go into configurations, but you should have named it DAM, Defense Against Misconfigurations.
Ooh, that's actually a good point. Well, technically, I call it DAC, dumbass configurations. So yeah, I got outvoted on that one. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to call it that.
All right. So what's interesting to me, I saw this announcement from you guys. I think you did it around,
Black Hat.
yeah, Black Hat. Right. Yeah. It wasn't RSA. It was Black Hat. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Right. Because if you think about kind of the natural evolution for where ThreatLocker is on the endpoint, pulling configuration data and looking at misconfiguration data was kind of like the next logical point, wasn't it?
Well, the genesis of it was actually interesting. So we originally envisaged it as checking our own configurations. So making sure people hadn't done dumb things in configuring ThreatLocker. So setting up a policy to allow everything to run from a user's folder, or, things like that they really shouldn't do because it's going to make them less secure. So we built that out, but as we were doing it, we realized that, well, hang on a second, there's a lot of other misconfigurations that aren't necessarily ThreatLocker misconfigurations that people will probably want to know about, or at least probably should know about it, even if they don't want to. So that's where Defense Against Configurations came from. Started off, as I said, as a ThreatLocker configuration checker, and it's just expanded into a all sorts of configurations checker.
So that's interesting, right? Because I would have thought, oh, clients asked for this. So like, hey, while you're on the box, grab my configurations. But that sounds like that's not exactly how it started.
Some of our best ideas and some of our best solutions do come absolutely from client requests. Very often, it's great feedback. People saying, hey, your product is awesome. I wish it would do X, is a great source of it. This one, primarily, that's with a lot of our best ideas, I think pretty much came straight out of our CEO, Danny's head. But as I said, there was a good reason for it in the first place, which was we don't want people to be breached because they've configured ThreatLocker wrong. Two, we don't want people to be breached because they've configured Windows wrong.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, Matt, you know this because we've covered Verizon data breach data. We've covered IBM cost of data breach data. Misconfigurations are always up there as far as threat vectors, right? And risks. The one place where I see a gap, though, that paradox is they're always a top breach vector when it comes to these statistics, but the conversation doesn't get elevated up to board, CEO, executive level as these major risks. So Rob, how do we change that dynamic? It's often viewed as a IT hygiene problem, right? And that's kind of the misnomer, but it's a massive risk to organizations. So how do we flip that? How do we change that conversation?
Well, part of the reason for us doing what we're doing is because you're far better off knowing about these things before they turn into a breach rather than after they have turned into a breach. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that is when people find out about these misconfigurations. I mean, they might say they adhere to apply to NIST or ISO 27001 or whatever the case may be, but when the rubber hits the road, what's actually happening on your machines is not always visible, or certainly isn't always visible in a central location or a place where you can actually go check. And if you are adhering to whatever the standard is today, are you tomorrow? Are you the next day? Or has something happened in the meantime for that configuration to drift from what is secure to what is not secure? And that's why this literally, from our perspective, we run this on every single machine every single day. The idea or the intention is that you will get better and better and better, and your score will go up and up and up, and you'll be more and more and more configured correctly. But equally, if something happens in the environment, or we add 20 new checks for things that we previously hadn't had checks for, maybe your score is going to go down. But the intention is to give visibility to these things, as I said, before they turn into a breach rather than after.
Yeah, so configuration's interesting, right? I've worked for 2 of the 3 major vulnerability management companies, right? And I know the third one pretty well. Having the configuration data is one thing, but having the configuration against a policy is something different. And what I mean by that is, all right, password length is 7. Is that good or bad? Right? Just having the value by itself isn't enough when it comes to configurations, which makes That's why vulns are easier. You either have the vulnerability or you don't. Policy has a little more complexity to it. How are you guys tackling that? Are you also looking at what the right setting for those configurations should be so you know whether they actually fail a policy? Because that's okay. Because that's a different set of capabilities than what some of the base platforms do, which is just say, hey, your password length is 7. You do what you want with it.
Well, absolutely. And this is the other sort of piece of the jigsaw. It's all very well knowing about these things. It's another thing either knowing what they mean. So what's the risk associated with having a password length of 2? So you want to tell them what the risks are. You want to tell them which frameworks refer to this thing, and you also want to tell them how they fix it. So that's the other 2 parts of the jigsaw that we're giving people. Now, sometimes the solutions, sometimes the answers to the problem are going to be ThreatLocker related fixes, because we've got configuration manager. Obviously, we've got all our other different tools that can do things like close firewall ports and that kind of stuff. But sometimes they're not ThreatLocker configurations. It could be a group policy setting. It could be, whatever the case may be. But again, not only are we telling people there's a problem, we're telling them why there's a problem, what the risks are associated with this problem, and how you fix the problem. Again, all in one place.
I mean, the other side of that, Matt, too, is configuration drift, right? And it's one thing to have the baseline, but then you're going to notice configuration drift, whether it's something that you want a drift to happen because you have the appetite for risk in certain areas, or you don't want that drift to happen because you want them to adhere to baseline. So Rob, how do you handle those type of items where you may have a risk appetite in certain areas, but not in others?
Well, that was an interesting one. So we actually did a webinar on this subject last week. And one of the questions, or one of the most common questions were, well, how do I ignore this risk?
Yeah.
I want to mark this as accepted. There's a reason that this misconfiguration has to be in place. How do I basically forget about it? Now, again, Danny was fairly strong about, look, we're not going to say you're more secure than you are because you've said you've accepted this misconfiguration as necessary. You can set it as accepted. You can put a really good reason in there to say it's accepted, but that doesn't mean that we're going to magically bump up your score from 90 to 100 because you've chosen to ignore a particular risk. The configuration drift is an interesting one as well. So obviously, again, you've got configuration drift within ThreatLocker, but the way I describe this is it's like a fresh set of eyes. So on your configuration, on how you're set up, it's literally a fresh set of eyes. We're not assuming that you are secure and then you're getting less secure over time. We're literally putting an entirely fresh set of eyes on your environment, on every single one of your machines, and checking the configuration. Currently, I think it's 170 different checks a day, but that number is obviously increasing over time. But we're checking every single one of those things fresh 170 checks on each machine every single day. So the intention is not necessarily to monitor for configuration drift. It's, is this configuration right or not? But as I said, the interesting thing was the number of people who said they didn't want to be told about certain misconfigurations and expected us to sort of adjust their security score accordingly was surprising.
Now that's an interesting point that you have there, Rob, because you're doing so much analysis and so many metrics are coming back to the team. Have you seen from an executive perspective? Now I start thinking about resource allocation, right? That's where my brain starts to go. Have you started to see a shift in where security teams are starting to focus as far as misconfigurations? Is it saving them time in one area so they can focus on a different area? Like, what is it doing for the team resource allocations, having this data in front of them?
Well, to be honest, one of the big benefits, I mean, number one, you don't have to go looking for this information. I mean, this is basically included for anybody who has ThreatLocker. It's in every agent. It's reporting back. You just turn on a switch and basically you've got this data. So there's no heavy lifting. There's no hard work that goes into actually gathering the information. I mean, the other thing about our approach in general, because we work off a default deny principle, there's a much less dependent, or there's much less occurrences of your EDR's kicked off an alert about this random thing running here or whatever the case may be. Because, again, like responding to alerts like that constantly, or having to respond to alerts like that constantly, is a real drain on resources. So because, again, we operate from a principle of default deny, it means there's a lot less going on that you need to respond to. So very often it does free up times for teams to work on things or, focus on things like misconfigurations.
So I'm curious how the two kind of work together, right? And this will expand a little bit as we start thinking about what other systems I need to integrate with here in a second. But I've got a set of misconfigurations. They're controllable through ThreatLocker. Can you automate like the updates of those configurations to kind of streamline the downstream remediation? Because that's a really cool feature within the product, first of all. But then I want to talk about the second part of that, which is other systems like Entra ID or other things like that, right?
So in terms of the keeping configurations fixed, we do have a product called Configuration Manager. And I don't want to say it's been unloved for some time, but it's kind of just been there for some time. We give it to people and we say, look, these, I think it's about 70 or 80 different things that you can fix with it. So like we've got a lapse equivalent, we've got, disable SMBv1, a lot of stuff that you can do via the registry or via group policy, you can do with Configuration Manager. Defense Against Configurations has basically breathed an entire new life into Configuration Manager because we realize there's a bunch of stuff that we're saying is wrong in DAC. We want to give people a solution to it. So therefore, we're going to make Configuration Manager policies available. And the really cool thing about Configuration Manager policies is they are self-healing. So if something goes out of compliance for whatever reason, whether it be password length or whatever the case may be, it's going to fix it and also tell you it's fixed it as well. So there is a self-healing component to it as well, but it's via Configuration Manager, generally speaking. I mean, sometimes it can be via other parts of the solution, but Configuration Manager is the bit that's going to get the most love because of DAC's existence.
Yeah, that's how you fix the drift issue, Jason, right? Because now you've got this rule that's set up every time it goes out. Nope, put it back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you see other integration points? Because this is where you guys are getting close to doing some really interesting stuff, but you start to cross some...
doing interesting stuff.
Well,
I resent that comment.
Well, that might be true. But yeah, but you got to be careful what you ask for, right?
This is
like
true.
You're starting to move over into almost some GRC-like capabilities, right? As you cross over, you're also crossing over into this kind of security orchestration response automation piece, right? And so I say that kind of tongue in cheek because you provide some capabilities, but how far do you go? Where do you draw the boundaries from a ThreatLocker perspective? Because you could move into some additional adjacencies here, which you may or may not want to do.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, the intention is to expand this to other areas. I mean, right now we're focused on the endpoint. That's not to say that we are going to stop at the endpoint because we do have some cloud products that we also have. So we've got Cloud Detect, we've got Cloud Control, we've got a lot of stuff that does sort of veer in that direction. So the likelihood is that this will do something similar. So once we've pretty much got it settled down on the endpoint and you've got a good picture of how your environment looks, obviously the next stage is you want to know if your cloud environment is secure as well. So absolutely there is scope, and there may or may not be already plans afoot that involve expanding the scope of this to other areas than just the endpoint.
Yeah, it's very logical. Cloud Security Posture Management, right? It's a bunch of configuration checks. Like I do this in my day job. That's why I'm asking these questions.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, mostly it's just a PowerShell command.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
So now from a leadership perspective, right? A lot of times we're having conversations on this show about empowering the CISO to go to have meaningful conversations with the board, with the executive team. And we talk a lot about leaving the bits and the bytes and the blinky lights out of the conversation and talking about business outcomes. Talk to me about what important metrics that CISOs can glean out of your product that they can bring to the table to get more investment, maybe to get the cloud control investment that you're talking about, or additional modules from ThreatLocker or capabilities from ThreatLocker. We have to win hearts and minds in order to get investment. What type of metrics would you recommend CISOs put in front of their board?
So one of the interesting things that's happened over the last, call it a year for argument's sake. So anybody who's been a customer of ThreatLocker will know this from looking at our portal. Danny, our CEO, used to be very much in the doesn't like sexy graphs and charts side of things. he's come around to the now likes sexy charts and graphs club, which is absolutely amazing, and customers are loving it. So we've done different dashboards for network control. We've done dashboards we're bringing a new one out for a Detect product next week. We've done one for application control. Basically, all of the places where we just have straight policies or data, we now have a lot of sexy charts with useful information. We've brought that into DAC as well. So we basically give people sexy charts with taking all of the raw data, all of the information, giving them a score, giving them, like I said, sexy charts, basically showing them where they can and can't, where the problems lie. Is it in, ThreatLocker configuration? Is it just general Windows? Whatever the case may be. There's a lot of information there. We also do by default, we'll send a weekly report. So basically, every week you will get a report that is effectively an executive summary, something that you can take to the board and say, look, hey, these are the areas we need to work on. This is why I need budget, this is why I need time, whatever the case may be. But it is literally designed for an executive report. It's not necessarily the nuts and bolts that a tech would get into. It's something that you can have a conversation with, in the case of an enterprise, your board. In the case of, you're looking after a lot of different companies, you can talk to the various stakeholders within those companies and say, well, look, this is the position you're in. So that's pretty much how we've tried to solve that problem, rather than giving them nuts and bolts down in the weeds stuff. Literally just give them an executive summary that says, look, this is the areas we need to focus on.
The other thing we talk a lot about on the show is the ecosystem, right? How do you plug into the rest of the ecosystem? How do you guys think about the integration discussion, right? Like, I could see value integrating your configuration data into my product, for example, right? Because we do control automation and we pull from a lot of different configuration sources. But as you guys continue to build out functionality, how do you look at the rest of the ecosystem around you? Because you got to kind of plug into some of these other platforms, don't you?
I'm going to diplomatically file that one under TBC. So the way, and look, we've had conversations with people that have asked about, either bringing data into ThreatLocker, bringing data out of ThreatLocker. Generally speaking, our solution to most problems has, it would be great if Detect is actually a really good example, because we've got so much information within ThreatLocker, within our platform, within our system, within our unified audit, that it made sense for us to build a detection tool, EDR, because we have all this information. We can see all these things are happening. Now, we could send that information out to a third party and say, hey, go EDR on this, or we could just build an EDR ourselves and make it the best EDR we can make. So very often the solution to, how do you integrate with X problem for us has been, well, why don't we build a better X, if that makes sense? Now, as I said, that's not to say that is definitively the direction we're going to go in. That is just the direction that, generally speaking, we will go ourselves. Is like, well, why would we send data to X if we can build a better X ourselves? Not saying we're going to build a better X than your X, Matt, but generally speaking, that's been the approach that we've taken heretofore.
Yeah. It's just like the SIM and some of those platforms, right? Do you really want to go out and build
to be honest, we've already started, and again, not saying definitively that this is the plan, but we've already started making it possible to pull in some of those other data sources that we've never had access to before from a SIM perspective. So obviously we've got a huge amount of visibility over what's happening on the endpoint. We've always had that, really, but we never had visibility of things like switches and firewalls and access points and that kind of stuff. So we actually developed a syslog ingester, a way to take information in from those disparate sources to bring it into the unified audit and ThreatLocker, because again, a lot of people want their data in one place. So again, it's probably another good example of where we developed the solution ourselves rather than depending on sending data to wherever it happens to be.
ThreatLocker building the platform.
Absolutely. Building the ecosystem.
Love it.
Can I just say, by the way, I can't believe you haven't complimented my T-shirt.
Oh, I did see it. DAC Attack is cute.
You didn't compliment it, though. You may have seen it. It's also got like little space things, dudes on it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't see that far down. The camera, my view kind of cuts that off a little bit.
I deliberately left the DAC Attack visible thinking you might compliment me on it, but that's okay. That's okay.
Well, I told you it should be damn, so it should be damn
Well,
attack.
that is true. That is true.
Here's the
Then
merch
it doesn't,
store. Give us
then
a
it doesn't
link.
rhyme with Mac because we also did introduce DAC for Mac last week.
That's true. That is true. For existing customers, is this something they can just turn on and start using right away?
Completely free, absolutely included, and very much encourage that people try it out. As I said, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to find out about stuff that you may not have wanted to find out about, but you probably should find out about sooner rather than later. So yeah, it's completely free. It's included basically for all customers, and try it out.
Awesome.
And even prospects as well. So one of the great things about ThreatLocker trials is if you try out the solution, you don't have to pay for it, and you can deploy it to your entire environment. See what the results come back as. Again, much like with allow listing and all the other stuff we'll do, there's got to be some surprises that will pop up. There'll be things that people didn't know about that they really should know about. So it's not only customers, it's prospects. It's pretty much anybody who wants to try the platform out can get it for basically no cost.
Yeah, and I would say, in this day and age, especially how we're seeing AI-enabled attacks, completely compounding the risks in an organization,
Absolutely.
you need to know right away. Absolutely, right? I mean, I'm sure you're seeing that on the ThreatLocker side, right? I'm sure it's dramatically changing the economics of an attack, which makes remediation and mitigation so much more important. And you need tools like this at the end point.
Well, I mean, in an ideal scenario, not an ideal world, prevention.
Prevention, yep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So again, know about these things before they turn into a breach rather than after.
Well, now that you have DAC for Mac, I guess I'm going to have to go try it out.
Yes, indeed.
Rob, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Cheers, Matt. Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
If you want to understand how to reduce your misconfigurations, please visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker to learn more. AI gives attackers superpowers, and your employees are the soft target. Flip the script with Fable Security, the modern human risk platform. Fable's powerful risk engine connects the dots on human vulnerabilities, like password hygiene, phishing risk, and data sharing in generative AI, and deploys hyper-targeted snackable AI nudges and briefings, just in time, right where your people work. The result? Hard outcomes. 13x faster behavior change, 60 to 90% risk reduction. Make Fable part of your cybersecurity story. Visit securityweekly.com/Fable. Every AI workflow in your enterprise touches sensitive data. Customer names, email addresses, financial records. One wrong move and you're facing a compliance nightmare. Enter Area, the enterprise AI orchestration and security platform built to protect what matters most. With Area, you don't have to compromise between speed and innovation or security and governance. Quickly deploy AI without cutting corners on compliance. Give your teams the confidence to adapt AI with Area. Stop gambling with your most sensitive information. Visit securityweekly.com/Area to see it in action. That's securityweekly.com/AIRIA. All right, now we're going to follow up that fun session with this week's articles, Jason.
Love it.
All right, first one. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. You asked this question around metrics, right? So cybersecurity management for boards, metrics that matter.
I love this article. In cybersecurity, we talk about this all the time. You can't protect what you can't see. Well, they had an interesting quote in here for the board side of the aisle, the executive side of the aisle. If you can't measure it, you can't govern it, right? So at the end of the day, I love that. We expect our boards to govern cybersecurity, invest in cybersecurity, oversee the finances and investments that we're going to put into these cybersecurity teams. We're doing it without metrics. We're doing it without measures. Mm-hmm. They need the clarity. They need to know there's accountability and foresight. So these metrics are so important.
I've been saying this for a long time. Boards speak in financial language,
Absolutely.
Financial impact, right? And so if you can't figure out how to take all this crazy data that we see every single day and put it into their terms, they don't understand it. And so and he gives examples in here. Like, these are really good examples, right? Like,
it's a great roadmap for any CISO to sit back and say, here are 4 domains that I can target every time I have a conversation with the board. Let's talk about financials and continuity. Let's talk about governance and compliance. Then let's talk about operational resilience and our effectiveness of our ability to respond to an attack. Then let's talk about strategic risk and our future readiness for any innovations or changes coming into the business. Those are 4 great domains that speak the language of the board.
Yes. And then you figure out the metrics in each one that
That's
you
right.
want to measure and report on. And now you have a consistent quarterly board report.
That's right.
That you can take to your board and say, okay, here's where we were. This is what we talked about last quarter. Here's where we are. Here's what's changed, improved.
Yep.
Here's areas that still have issues that we might need to address now.
That's right. You can't walk into a board meeting and talk about patch counts and firewall logs. And, you just can't be having those technical conversations. You need to elevate those to these domains, align those conversations, those technical metrics that you have to these domains, and then speak the language of the business. Bring it to that level.
Yep. He gives
That's
a little,
how you get investment.
Yeah, exactly. That's how that's how you get attention first.
That's right.
And then eventually how you get budget and the dollars you need to fix it. So look at your current board metrics. What do they tell you? If they tell you a bunch of technical stuff, time to throw them away.
You're going to lose them. You're going to lose the board. Yep.
Then he says define 1 to 2 metrics per category that align with your risk appetite as a company.
That's right.
Then set expectations for reporting cadence accountability, typically quarterly, it could be monthly, depending on your board. Iterate, improve, adapt. Period. Like, this is what we should be doing, folks.
That's it.
That's it. Simple. Gartner comes out with this discussion around new CIOs can demonstrate value through risk management. I pull these articles in because you just changed CIO with CISO. It's the exact same.
Oh, and to be honest with you, Matt, I've even seen it from the CIO side. The number of times we've had new incoming CIOs come to us and say, I'm walking in the door. I have 0 situational awareness. I need a third party to come in here and assess. Right? Assess the risk, assess the technical debt, assess the current state. Give me the situational awareness that I need as a new CIO in this organization to be able to put my feet under me and understand what's happening holistically in this organization. It happens at the CIO level all the time. It definitely happens at the CISO level as well. It is so important to go through a risk exercise the second you walk in the door, because at the end of it, you don't want to be the victim of something that may have happened in the past, misconfigurations and things of that nature, like we just talked about. You want to get your feet under you the second you walk in that door.
Yes. But let's make sure that what you're getting actually helps you from a risk conversation. Right. Because I've seen a lot of these kind of engagements, and it's more like a compliance checklist. It's like, let's come in and do a NIST CSF assessment.
Yep.
Okay, so that tells me how I'm doing against my control state. That by itself does not necessarily equate to risk, right?
Not at all.
And so I see these a lot out there, and I've seen different providers provide these posture assessments. What we're talking here is not necessarily just posture assessment. It's understanding risk assessment. What does your risk look like when you take all of that into account?
Right.
Where are the potential biggest risk areas? And if you can quantify them even better, because then it gives the CIOs and the CISOs some ammunition around budgeting.
Right. That's right. And hey, by the way, go in understanding or learn with the anticipation as a consultant that you're going to understand the business objectives, so you can help identify risk, be able to help them analyze and prioritize those risks, because that's how you develop that risk response, right? If you're a partner going in, you don't want to just do the technical assessment or the controls assessment. You actually want to interview president of the board, interview the CEO, interview the major stakeholders in the organization, so you can understand what motivates the business, what those business objectives are. It'll help you bubble up business risk better, right? So you want to be looking at all those things. It's not just the pen test or the control test or an assessment at that level. It's interviewing the business and understanding the objectives of the business, the risk appetite of the business, and helping them prioritize and help them develop remediation strategies.
Yeah.
And then how do you monitor from then on end, right? And keep that visibility going. That's the strategic way to do it.
Right. Say easy, do hard.
That's absolutely. Maybe the next one, Matt. Idea. Let's table that idea.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, I have to come back to this recording and be like, what was
right.
that topic again? Oh, yeah. Continuous risk management. Yes. All right. Next article. 70% of CISOs say internal conflicts more damaging than cyber attacks.
100% true at the end of the day. I mean, listen, if you can't have a team of leaders and executives who are on the same page, it's bound to fail, right? It's absolutely bound to fail. And those internal conflicts, whether it's between the CISO and the CEO or the CISO and the CFO, it starts to erode trust, right? And you got to get on the same page. Over the course of my career, I've always had this strategy, and I call it the 11th commandment. And the 11th commandment for me is, if I have an executive that I disagree with, we're going to table it, we're going to set it aside, and we're going to spend some time in my office or their office or at lunch or at dinner, and we're going to hash this thing out. We're going to hash it out together, and the next time we come to a leadership meeting, we're going to be arm in arm, hip to hip, solid strategy together. Because you can't have that perception that the CISO is undermining other executives or undermining some strategies or undermining anything. You can't have that. Now, as I read through this article, they gave different examples of, from folks in the industry. And one of the examples was by emphasizing authentication and behavioral analytics and other forms of passwordless protection, CISOs can show how their approaches deliver better protections and less friction. I put no bits and bytes. We're talking about the bits and the bytes. That's
Right.
not the conversations you want to be having about how the security team are the enablers. You want to have the Jeff Pollard conversations that are later on in the article, which we've had him on the show.
Right.
About, listen, the CISO isn't just running a call center. They enable revenue. They enable market share. They enable customer retention. They are a strategic arm of this company, and they help drive revenue and customer retention. That's the conversation you want to be having. Not how password protection is helping the organization not, bring friction to the table. No, that's not the conversation. It's important on its own right from a technical side of the aisle, but that's not the conversation you're bringing up to the CEO.
Right. That was last week's interview, the emergence of the trust officer, the chief trust officer, right? They are a revenue enabler.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the conversation you want to have.
Yep.
So, as conflict arises, my point in the beginning of this is, as conflict arises, table it. Don't be doing it in public with the rest of the executive team. Table it and make sure you can go have a side conversation with the person who may have an issue, a disagreement, misaligned. Maybe they need clarification. Maybe you need to reset expectations. Do that on the side with that person. Have those discussions and the debate offline. Then bring it back to the table, and the rest of the team will see how you can work with these other executives to come to a middle ground, to come to good business decision together and work together.
Right. Yeah. Great advice, Jason. Modern attacks don't just hit devices. They target your users to gain access to Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. And when those platforms go down, it's not just email, it's your entire business. That's why there's Kaseya 365 User, one unified platform that protects your users and SaaS applications. Phishing, credential leaks, insider risks, it stops them all. Learn more and schedule a demo at securityweekly.com/K365. This podcast is supported by AutoRabbit. You trust Salesforce to power your business, but even the best systems have blind spots. Hidden risks like over-permissioned users, untested code, and missing backups can quietly slip through the cracks. AutoRabbit closes those gaps. Their DevSecOps platform brings automation, governance, and security together so you can build fast and stay protected. Because speed means nothing if you can't trust what you deliver. Visit securityweekly.com/AutoRabbit to learn more. All right. Cybersecurity leadership, how the NFL keeps overseas events secure and resilient. I had to throw this article in.
Hey, listen, this was a super cool article that gives folks a perspective into what's involved with security in your let's call it non-traditional businesses like the NFL, right? Now, it showed me why stadiums are on the CISA critical infrastructure sector list, right? It's considered the commercial facilities sector. because they operate with public access, means the general public can move freely. They're highly visible. You know, they have some security barriers in place, but the risk is high because you have tens of thousands of citizens in one place at one time. And it could be a huge risk, right? A major risk. Now, you know, not just from a technical perspective, but a life safety perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So this gave some really good insights into how, you know, someone who's operating both the physical and the technical security with non-traditional technologies as well, because you have point of sale, you have ticketing systems, you have the open Wi-Fi for 70,000 fans. Like, it's all these really non-traditional items that are in there, and kind of how he went through his career and got into this area. It was really, really cool article. I liked it a lot.
It was, and he talks about humans and the need for human oversight, regardless of how good the technology is. And look, we've seen continued conversations around layoffs because of AI and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, he says, look, no matter how sophisticated, cannot operate effectively without human oversight. He's talking about technology, right? And that includes artificial intelligence and all these other new whiz-bang systems that are coming out.
Yeah, especially in a scenario like this with the commercial facilities, you know, again, 70,000 people in one place at one time watching a football game. Technology is a tool. And he says in here, it's not a substitute for judgment. You have to have, when you have that many lives that could be at risk, you have to have good human judgment making decisions.
Yep, absolutely. Which leads us into our leadership and some other development strategies here. So the emotional architecture of leadership, why energy, not strategy, builds great teams.
This was a great article too, Matt. Honestly, it really was, because, you know, it starts off by saying we tend to think of leadership as clarity and vision and decision making. And then I took a note and I said, when have you ever heard an employee who loves you as a leader say, "Oh my God, I love your decision making. It's infectious"? They don't. They absolutely don't. They say, "I love your energy as a leader."
Right.
Energy is infectious. Energy is something you bring to the table every day that shows your motivation and your dedication. It's such an important component to leadership. Yes, strategy is important. Yes, decision making is important. But the energy you bring to the table is the perception of what everybody else takes you in as.
Yes. You want to work for somebody that loves what they do. They're energized to do it, right? Because that's where it starts. Yeah, you might debate their strategy later and some other things, but you're there because you see the energy and who's leading the company, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is what I want to do," right?
I mean, there's a big difference between what you say and the feeling you emote when you truly believe in something, right? There's such a huge difference in just saying things to say a strategy or a decision, or you're so behind it and so, you know, emotionally engaged in it that you just sense the energy. You can feel it.
Yes. Yes. It's why I've worked for a lot of the companies I work for, because the leaders were highly energized, knew what they wanted to do. Like, they were there every day, energized and ready to go. Right.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So makes a huge difference.
That energy when you're a leader is so important. And I get it. You know, we all work hard. We all feel burnout every once in a while, but our job as leaders is to make sure we're on for our employees, right? We have to be. Yep. But then take care of ourselves behind the scenes, right? Take care of ourselves so we can always maintain that energy. Don't let yourself burn out. If you feel yourself getting to that point, it might be time for a vacation or take a Friday off or something like that, so you can go recharge and come back with that same level of energy.
Yeah.
That important.
It is, to the point where I've seen, look, I've gone through phases of it, and I've seen others go through phases of it, is when you hit the burnout, sometimes you can't take a short leave. Sometimes you need a little longer break, right? And sometimes that means you leave, you move on. So you also have to understand, like, okay, maybe it's time for me to take a break on doing something else. It's definitely, because if you lose the energy and you hit that burnout wall, like, your employees, everybody's going to see it. It's going to drag everything else down with it, which,
you know, that's infectious too, Matt. Right?
I know.
The lack of motivation, the lack of energy becomes infectious as well. So you can't allow that to root. You can't allow that to root into your organization or your department, So if you feel it and you're feeling it with yourself, our teams are going to mirror us as leaders. They just will. That's just how things operate. They mirror us. They mirror our personalities. They mirror our energy. We can't afford to let something like that root into our team. So we have to have the senses for ourselves to know when we need to take that break or disconnect a little bit so we can maintain that high level.
Yes, agreed 100%. All right, last article. Your transformation can't succeed without a talent strategy.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought,
right? I mean, the first step is making sure you actually have a strategy. And for the CISOs out there, it might be worthwhile to sit down with your HR representative or your chief people officer and say, listen, what is the corporate development strategy here? How do I better align with it? And you may come to a realization that there really isn't a structured development strategy within the organization. Well, guess what? Now you have Greenfield. Help them build it. Right? It's that extreme ownership mentality, Matt. If it doesn't exist, guess what? Bulldoze it, make it exist. Because you need it as a CISO, and all you're doing is helping the rest of the organization get talented people and keep talented people there. Right. So if it doesn't exist, help build it.
Help build it. Yes. Because she says in here, Gallup reports that employees with access to development opportunities are 3.6 times more likely to be engaged. How do you help develop your employees? That keeps them engaged. It keeps them there so they don't leave. Remember, Jim Ralph, employees don't want to be retained. They want to be developed, right? They want to develop their careers. They don't want to just be retained, right? Nobody wants to be retained.
They need to make sure there's a path. They need to make sure there's a future. They need to make sure that their professional goals are going to be met. In the outline that they have here of the 4 different places that you want to focus is a good start to a roadmap that you can sit down with your HR professionals with, right? Make sure that there's leadership development strategies. Make sure there's professional development strategies. Those 2 are different things.
Right.
They're different things, and you have to take care of both of those aspects. Make sure there's always communicated opportunity for internal mobility, right? Making sure that you have enough cross-departmental communication and collaboration to know when there's an open role in another department, that may be a great opportunity for someone on your team, and then vice versa. Making sure that open opportunities on your team are communicated out because there may be great talent in your organization already that you can take advantage of, and then make sure that constant communication with the employees is there, right? What opportunities are there? What trainings are there? How are you going to help them from a professional perspective? And it's got to be a strategy that's not, I'll call it modern education strategy. It just can't be a slew of certifications and be done, or a slew of class time and be done. It needs to be multimodal. It needs to be, you have to bring it to the teams in different ways. People learn different. It can be 10-minute videos. It can be snippets from social media. It can be articles to read. It can be podcasts to listen to. And you align it with formal trainings and certifications and things like that.
I've seen certain industries kind of force internal mobility. They rotate people into different positions. I saw a lot of this in oil and gas, right? Yep. If you think about that from a development perspective, you're giving these leaders and other employees the opportunity to learn other parts of the business, which opens up other opportunities for them to either stay in that role or move to another one. But some industries are very good at rotating leaders specifically into different positions to give them a much broader understanding of the overall business as they move up the leadership chain.
And that only helps the business because now you have that diversity of thinking. It helps eliminate silos because now you have leaders who have been in a couple of different areas in the business and they understand that my decision right now may have an adverse effect on these 2 other, 3 other, 4 other teams. So I really need to rethink this strategy because I know it's not going to do good for those other 2 teams I work for because I would have been on the receiving end while I was there. Right? Yeah. So it just gives that diversity of thought and that institutional knowledge across how decisions that you make will affect other departments and other people in the company.
Jason, always a pleasure. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.